Right, we shall just wait a couple of more minutes. In the meantime, feel free to do the check-in and we can see who else is in the room today. Mars. Seriously? Hello, Ziming.
Hello.
Are you working from home?
No, I just left my office.
Oh. So you actually went back to UOB?
Yeah, still working in office.
Oh.
Not working from home yet.
And I guess while we are just kind of like waiting for others to join the session, feel free to unmute. You can still be social, even though the common behavior is like a webinar, but it's supposed to be like online meetup, right? So we can still say hi to everyone in a very awkward manner. Hi, Rocky. I have a feeling like those Facebook Live, you know.
What makes you say that?
Like there's no one to interact with and you're just interacting with the chat, right? Just
Okay, I come to your rescue.
Hi, Rocky. Hi, Jessie. Random noodle restaurant. Seriously, who?
Yeah, what noodle restaurant are you at?
Whoever that wrote that, maybe would like to answer.
Yeah, sure.
Is Singapore on a lockdown?
No.
No.
Good for you guys.
How's it in Malaysia?
We are on our second day of limited lockdown. We can still go out, but everybody's advised strongly to stay home. Yeah.
Yeah.
difficult times.
Ah, oh,
Interesting. We have quite a bit of researchers in the room,
right.
more than usual.
Maybe I'll just like randomly chime in. Yeah, I'm actually on the train right now, so it might be a bit noisy. Yeah, but I love online meetups. It's like, why don't we do this all the time? I mean, maybe because I'm a bit of an introvert as well, so yeah, I feel like we should be doing this all the time. I guess like with regards to the topic today as well about design sprints. So I do design research and design. But I've never actually ran a proper like 5-day design sprint before. Yeah, so I'm kind of interested to find out how yeah, Shazad, you do it. Yeah, that's all.
Okay. All right. Actually, research is a big deal for a design sprint. And I'm gonna share a little bit about that. We kind of adapted the usual design sprint to be actually research centric a little bit. Yeah, but we'll see how it goes.
Great, looking forward.
Yeah, maybe we should just do remote meetup in future.
I know, right? There are so many things that people previously say cannot be done online, and then it turns out if you have to, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is my second like online meetup in this period already. And like I think I saw Erica Hall, like she's organizing some online what do you call like book club? Yeah. So if you're interested, you can go check out her Eventbrite page.
Erica Hall, the researcher, right? She wrote a book on
Yeah,
research.
just enough research.
Right, right.
Oh, Quarantine Book Club, is that the one?
That's,
Okay, I think it's also interesting for me to think about how many drop-offs are there in a online meetup like this, because there's like I think 60 or 70 who RSVP. I thought that without the traveling and without having to shuttle around, probably more will turn up. It looks like we have 15 now, so it's an interesting insight there. Maybe more will chime in shortly. Okay. You probably will also notice that the pigeonhole is where we can ask questions later on. So if you have questions along the way during the session as Shaja is presenting, just feel free to post it there. And then you can go through the usual voting and we will find time to answer those along. Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe let's start so that we make our time efficient here for those who have joined in early and are committed to be here. Hi everyone, I'm Kiet. Welcome to actually the very first meetup of the year, and it's also the very first meetup that we are doing virtually. We actually did another, not really a meetup, but a get together, meet the mentor session just over on Tuesday for the ICEDay Community Mentoring Initiative. So I think some of you may be there. Like Bharat was there. Yeah, and it turned out pretty okay, I think. So it's good that we are trying this another time, and maybe we'll do it more often, looking at this difficult situation. So today's session, we are really, really happy to have Shaja to come and join us and share about her thoughts about design sprint. And how this really happened was because I was following her on Instagram, and I always see all the Insta stories about her design sprints going on. And like, oh my God, I think I need to learn from you how you are doing it. physically, but then all this virus thing happened, and then everyone is starting to talk about how do we do it remotely now. Yeah, so I think hopefully people will share some of the wisdoms there. Yeah, and we are also thinking about doing design sprints for some of our like clients in the coming future. So yeah, it's really a time where everyone can learn about it, whether you want to run it physically in person or even do it remotely. I think this would be a good opportunity that we can learn from each other. Okay, so you all have gone through the audience check-in. I shall skip this part. I think since this is a remote session, it's still kind of being facilitated somehow. So I think some group norms is good to have. As the presenter is presenting, do mute yourself so that we don't have any noisy interference, right? That will disrupt other people. If you would like to say something, you can always send a message in the chat to everyone first, or if you want to send a message privately, you feel free to do so. Yeah, you can even be social here by sending messages privately to one another, right? To like if you meet a friend here and then, hey, you can just chat over here as well. Do know that if you actually drop out from the Zoom call and you join back in again, the chat will be gone. So in case there was some links that was being posted but you don't see it again, just feel free to yeah, shout it out again and we'll paste in the link. Respect others, be nice, and of course, if you need to leave the session while the presentation is going on, just feel free to do so silently. No judgment is going to be cast upon you, so don't worry about that. Of course, if you want to say bye, have something else I want to leave, feel free to do so as well. Yeah. And yes, you may be hearing some cat meows going on. The cat is behind and probably making a lot of disruption, so I will have to try to mute myself along the way. A little bit about IXDA for those who are new, who have never heard about IXDA before. So the IXDA is actually a non-profit organization. We've been around since 2003. We started the local group in Singapore since 2011, so it's around 9 years now. IXDA is actually all around the world. If you happen to be traveling, which I don't advise to right now, but if you happen to travel next time, and there might be a local group somewhere like in the States, as well as in Europe, there's quite a big community there, even down at South Africa as well, right? So we are over 244 local groups now, if I'm not wrong. There isn't a membership, so anyone who calls themselves a member is a member, right? So that's how they pick an arbitrary number of 100,000 is park it there. Yes, so I mentioned we started in 2011. So the community here has been around for about 9 years. So we've been always trying to find ways on how we can serve the community in Singapore and as well in around the region. So like last year, you probably have attended quite a number of like our talk shows, kind of format, which is like a fireside chat. We have been doing the World Interaction Design Day as well. So this year is a lot focusing on both the remote meetup as well as the mentoring initiative that's going on right now. Okay. So here we have, how do I pronounce your name again? What would be the best to pronounce?
My name?
Yeah.
Just Shaza. Shaza is okay.
Yeah, I have to practice it. Yeah, so we're really honored to have Shaza here with us today.
There you go.
She is the UX principal at Stampede. Really curious about how do you end up with the name Stampede, like Stampede. And she's doing this, joining us from Malaysia. Where about in Malaysia right now?
That's a secret.
Oh, that's a secret hideout. Okay, so I shall probably just pass the baton to you to do a self-introduction. Share your screen, yeah, feel free to do so. I think over the baton to you.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Right. Okay. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Perfect. Hi. Um, total disclaimer. I have not done this before. Remote talk is very new to me, but I'm very privileged that Kat followed my Insta story, um, where I post a lot of Instagram stories about design sprint, which means I have no life except design sprint probably. But yeah, so that was a really nice gesture, Kat. Thank you so much. But first, the reason why I didn't wanna tell anybody where I am. My location is secret is because it's gonna be on my slide. So this is where I live. I live on an island called Langkawi. This was taken before coronavirus, so it's not that I went to the beach and then and I broke my quarantine. But we have a lot of nice beaches in Langkawi. It's just 1 hour away from Singapore. And I have been living in Langkawi for 6 years. But because of that, because I love living on an island, my team has to be remote. So we have also been remote for 15 years. And this is my team. They're all remote, by the way. So we're like the OG of work from home. And when we first started in 2006, our very first client was from the Netherlands. And now these are our clients. We also have a few clients in Singapore. And yes, but Stampede itself is a UX agency, and we help teams design and build products and services that people want to use. If you probably have used Touch and Go at the Causeway, then that's us to blame. If you have used RFID, same thing. So these are a few of our clients. One of my crowning achievement was building a website for the Museum of Sex in New York. That was when I was very young. That was a fun project. Right. But how I started was 14 years ago, I started designing. So this is my background. I started as an amateur design thinker. Then I became a web designer fairly quickly. I then around 2010, 2012, nobody wants to work with web designing anymore. Everybody was UI designer. So I was a UI designer as well. Then I became creative lead. Simply, I give myself this title simply because I have other designers under me. Now, unfortunately, my role is a UX principal, which means I basically tell people how to do their UX, even though most of the time I know shit about it. But the latest evolution that I feel that I have earned is I'm a designer myself. I have been. This is something that I really feel good about. This is the job that I relate the most. And as a designer, I feel like I am doing something good to the world. That's what I tell myself every day. Okay, so my job as a designer nowadays, it's increasingly less about designing, it's more about hitting that sweet spot. And the sweet spot is right here in the center between desirability, viability, and feasibility. I advise a lot of companies and product teams how can you actually find the sweet spot between business, tech, and design. And you don't want to be in it because a lot of teams and a lot of products are actually straddling the space in the center here instead of at the dead center. So we try to give perspectives that nobody has to lose for a product to be great. Tech, design, and business can work together, and we can show them how. So one of the ways that we do that is actually through design sprint. Right. So in my evolution as a designer, I speak like I'm a dinosaur, but in my evolution as a designer, initially I was at very designing at a very surface level. I love typography. I love working with layout. I do a lot of interface design. I suck at animation and motion, but then after that I move on and I start looking at things a little bit differently. I work with a lot of user flows. I did service blueprints, wireframes, start looking at how do you communicate using visual language. Then my job requires me to zoom out a little bit more and start looking into strategy and design as a way to execute that strategy. So I work with product managers, product owners over a longer roadmap, maybe 1 year or 2, 3 years down the road. But recently in my career, I still needed to zoom out a little bit more in order to design something at a larger scale and to start designing with the view of the entire ecosystem. So nothing is isolated anymore. Everything is interconnected. But as you design at a higher and higher scale, the problems that you face becomes more complex. And the common themes that I'm seeing is many product teams are missing their North Star. They do things because they think there's a demand, not really because they really believe and they wake up excited to do it. Because initially they push for a very fast implementation, fast going to market. So they incur a lot of design and technical debt. There are many stakeholders, many different people working on the same product, but all of them has misaligned motivations. And they are always at odds with each other. This is very, very common, not talking to the right user. Why I say this is because usually when we take on a new client, the first thing that we do is we ask them, so what has been the homework they do about the user and who do they consider as a user? And typically the answer would be, we have tested the product, we have done our homework, we have tested the product with the user. Who's the user? Our colleagues, our boss, the guy in the next department. So the talking to the right user is perceived as difficult and time consuming. So many product teams are having this challenge. There's also the strategy and execution gap. Sometimes you have very, very good strategy. You have like your roadmap all drawn out, but executing it, it doesn't get translated to the teams who would be executing it. So we have seen this many times. So the questions that we actually get is, product teams are asking, are we actually solving the right problem here? And what if people don't want to pay for this product? We have to hurry because we don't want our competitor to get there first. But what if we're too early for the market? Are the users ready for it? Or what if we're too late? Do people really want to use this? Or what if we build it and they don't come? And what if that is great, but we fail to execute? So in short, weak teams, and I can summarize it to people getting scared when there's a lot of uncertainty, people getting scared if they get it wrong. So we were wondering, so around 3 to 4 years ago, we were wondering if there was a surefire way to solve complex problems. We have tried many things. We have tried designing first and then showing to the client, trying to get the requirements right. But whenever we do that, we continue getting revisions and changes, and developers are not happy, then we have to change. So it really feels very inefficient for me. So I was looking for a way out, and then I started looking into all the frameworks available out there. But I started by understanding first how I solve problems. So this noodle. Originally, I call it spaghetti, but somebody in my talk says that no, that looks more like a noodle to me. Okay, so this is how every complex problem solving feels like in my head. When you're trying to figure something out, when there's a lot of uncertainty, you tend to make assumptions, and these assumptions are making you feel like the grounds under you shake. And actually, many product teams, even on the day that they ship their product, they still have this uneasy feeling. And it is actually dangerous because if you start your day zero with assumptions and you never get them validated, you're just incurring more and more risk. So you're building a bigger house of cards. And if you don't get those validated, imagine if you have spent millions of dollars working on a product that you really believe in, only to realize that all your assumptions were wrong. So we have discovered that because sometimes we are observers, we are agents, we are an agency, so sometimes we have the opportunity to observe how teams figure out what to do with the product and the assumptions that they make. We actually saw this. If the team takes time to correct a problem at the definition phase, then the effort and the cost remains whatever effort and time that they spend to that time. But if they wait until it gets to a designer, until it has become a wireframe or an interface, then the cost will be 10 times to fix. But if it waits until it gets to a developer, and I don't know if there are developers here in this group, it will get to 100 times, and then your developer will be like this. I have my own developers. In Stampede, we do have our own developers, and it's not an antagonistic relationship. We actually really care deeply about our developers, and it's quite painful to see this happen to them. So to change this to from another perspective, if you understand and you validate your assumption early, that is your cost of prevention, and you only need to pay one time. But if you wait until design, that becomes a cost of correction already. It will cost you 10 times. But if you wait until it gets to development or until you have built your product, it is 100 times, and not many companies can weather this. So all these are all problems that product teams face. But why is design sprint one of the most applicable answer that we have found? So design sprint is actually done in such a way that it is really a stress test for your product idea, and it only takes 5 days. So I like to say that design sprint is a cheap way to fail, but it's also a cheap way to win, because it takes you 5 days. It gets a lot of important people together. It makes you, no matter how you see it, even if your product fail, you will emerge from design team, from a design sprint as a team. So imagine if you wait until your product has been fully formed, you have perfected everything, only to discover that actually your ideas don't work. Instead, you can do that in 5 days' time. So a design sprint is, but however, there are some caveat to using design sprints. The purpose of a design sprint is to answer critical business questions, so that you can validate your problem solving, and you can also stress test your solution before you even build it. Design sprint is good for when you're kicking off a new feature or product, or when you're solving problems with an existing product. So it can have it both ways. We have done design sprint for both types of problems, for a new product or for an existing product. Now, but what kind of problems? It's the kind of problems that has high risk, because if the problem itself is low risk, then it's not so you don't really need a design sprint for it. Imagine calling a CEO or a tech lead to actually join a design sprint, and the problem is just like, should we change the button color to blue or green? So those are not the kind of problems that you want to solve with design sprint. Second, a problem that has many unknowns instead of high certainty, and a problem that has a lot of assumptions when it comes to whether people want to use it or not. So this is a great problem to have if you want to run a design sprint. Another kind of problem would be if the problem is of high complexity, because if it's low complexity, it's not really that sexy to solve. And a design sprint for a high stake problem is going to get a lot of buy-in. And also, strangely enough, a lot of methods actually don't favor having many stakeholders, but for design sprint, we have seen it over and over again. This is the time for you to actually bring many stakeholders. Sometimes a lot of them are deep in disagreement with each other, but we get there in one space, and then they actually were so focused on the problem they forgot all the other political things that are happening. So design sprint is great when the problem requires involvement of many stakeholders. But then, okay, so then the question is, right, so we have a problem that just fits for design sprint, but when is the right time to do it? So typically, many product teams now, they run two tracks. The first track is called the discovery track, and the second track is called the delivery. So discovery is when you are coming up with ideas, you do user research, you try to understand the problem, you come up with many different solutions. And delivery is when you finally build the product and you release it. So the beauty of this system is once you're done discovering and you hand it over to your delivery team, your discovery team can now move on to the next problem you want to solve. So things can work concurrently. So a design sprint is best when it is done during the discovery track, right after user research, and over here. And the result of a design sprint would be actually validated ideas that then will be funneled to the delivery team as product backlog. So this is a good time to run a design sprint. The process of design sprint is fairly cyclical. You probably have seen this many times. It's a typical design thinking, four-step design thinking. First, you ideate, then you build. After that, you launch, and then you learn. And if it doesn't work, then you ideate again, and then you learn again. So it becomes cyclical. But the beauty about design sprint is you do that many times. So you don't just stop once, but whatever untested decisions you have, you run it through design sprint over here. And sometimes your product failed, your idea failed, and you will kill them. So is the survival of the fittest. Only those that actually win with the user will get built. So this, as you can imagine, this sounds really good to a business person, to a product owner, because they have a lot of, they have more sense of certainty and they have more confidence when they are about to spend a lot of money building a product, especially if it has been proven that user responds well to it. Right, but all this sounds great. How can it just take 5 days, right? Because it actually, it doesn't have to take longer than that. So the Pareto law said that 20% of the time that you spend actually yield 80% of your results, and we have seen this over and over again. A week of design sprint typically would result in a product backlog that can easily fulfill around 2 to 3 delivery sprints. So we keep developers busy, and there's a lot of value-added knowledge, lessons learned, many positive outcome coming out of a design sprint, even if the idea itself fails. To illustrate why that 20% work. So this is a master list of all the, this is almost like our remix, our playlist at Stampede. When we do research, when we do solutioning, and when we are testing, analyzing, and iterating. So these are all the methods that we use. But if I were to impose a design sprint on this, these are actually the methods that you're going to do in a design sprint. So it touches all the 3 phases, and it is sufficient enough for you to actually find out a lot about the product, but you only spend 5 days. So if I were to, do all of these playlists that we do at Stampede, this would easily take months. There's a lot of stakeholders, lots of logistics. The process is long, but instead you get 20%, and you can do it in 5 days time. Right. But I feel like one of the things I really like about design sprint, and because I have my own agency, so I founded Stampede. So on top of me being a designer, I am also a business person. And one of the gifts that I wish every business person have is the gift of foresight. It's knowing the future before you commit to it. And we have seen it again and again. If you run a design sprint, you actually greatly increase the chance of your team making something that people want. So you're not just doing it because it's your gut feeling, your friends say that it's gonna work, your mom promised to pay for it. No, so you actually do something that people really want to have in their life, and they can't wait for you to finally build this damn thing. You immediately reduce doubt and uncertainty. So a team that is confident and a team that is singular in focus is beautiful to watch. So if you have a product team who is struggling with doubt and uncertainty, design sprint typically removes that. Plus, design sprint it is low investment, but it gives high reward for business. We have seen businesses actually spending 6 months trying to come up with a prototype, trying to come up with a mock-up, a proof of concept. Over that 6 months, tens of times they change and change and change. The developer quit, the designer quit. When actually it could be compressed into a 5-day week. For them to actually figure out should we do it or not. Another thing that was amazing about design sprint is because it's limited, right? You only have 5 days. It actually forced people to be very practical and for people to always default to doable solution. And developers love this. Developers love as a designer, because I'm a designer. So if I'm handing over something to a developer, and if I say I have done my due diligence, I have done my homework, I know it can be done, it was done on this website, this is a CSS for it, the developers would have a newfound respect for you. And I think this is one of the I guess something that is not really apparent until you run a design sprint, and especially if you involve a developer in your design. Oh, and one more perk that we saw out of the design sprint is, so you know when you start on day one and everybody's like, oh, why do you have to involve us in this? You know, you're locking us in for 5 days. We're gonna hate this time. I don't like this guy. I don't like that guy. The developer sucks. Designer don't know shit. We hear all this on the first day, but on the last day, everybody actually realized they're all on the same side. When they watch usability testing happening, it was they actually really behave and feel like, you know, they're together as a team. So there is a very distinct unifying factor and clear sense of accomplishment when they complete a design sprint. Right. So I've sold design sprint already, but how it feels to me when I'm running design sprint. So remember this spaghetti noodle? So initially I feel like this guy, but so this is a Monday, right? Everything is moving, everything is uncertain. But on the last day, you're gonna feel so invincible like this. Like you're bulletproof. And so you always start with an empty whiteboard, which is very, very scary for any designers out there. On the last day, you're gonna have a prototype and you're gonna have people interacting with that prototype. So I feel like it's almost like you go into a cave and you lock yourself in that cave, and then suddenly 5 days after, then something magical happened, and you already, like when you go out in the world, it's totally different. So this is how it feels like. Okay, so I've sold you how design sprint works, why does it work, but I also want to talk about the process of a design sprint, because I'm a designer. I'm very, very attracted to process. So I'm gonna give you a quick run through of what you're gonna do if you're gonna run a 5-day full design sprint, as well as tips and practical things, mistakes that I've made, so that you don't have to make them. So that I hope that it gives you confidence to try one on your own. So all these methods I'm gonna share after this have been adapted and tested by Stampede team, so help us God. Okay, so typically a design sprint takes 5 days, from Monday to Friday. The first day is a mapping day. On a Tuesday, we're gonna do sketching. On Wednesday, we decide which solution to use. Thursday, we do prototyping. On Friday, we test. Sometimes Stampede actually cheat a little bit, and we would change Wednesday. So we will move forward Wednesday. Instead of deciding on a Wednesday, we're gonna do sketching and deciding on Tuesday, so that we will have Wednesday and Thursday to do prototyping. And the reason why we do it is because our prototypes are usually complicated. They involve engineering, and they involve lots of data science. But what I want to talk about is not just the 5 days. So if the strongest influence to a design sprint actually happened before design sprint itself, which is part of the design sprint that we call the pre-sprint. So the pre-sprint happened before the design sprint week. This is where you would do just enough research. You would get to know the user for real. And also you're gonna assemble your sprint team and send a welcome note to prepare everybody. So these are all important for you to set the right conditions for a successful design sprint. We start getting to know the user because remember we are an agency, so we don't really know much about the user. So we typically start by interviewing the product team and ask, who is the user? Usually we get this answer, everyone. Every single stakeholder I know at some point of their life will answer this to me. Everyone. It's probably, I mean, like, I know that it's wishful thinking. You want everyone to use your product. But it also, if you try to satisfy everyone, you satisfy no one. So we try to kind of like tell them, great, you're gonna get everyone, but you gotta start with someone first. So we would, oh yeah, so that is from the stakeholder perspective. But then I also made the mistake of, because I'm a designer, right? When I first started designing a website, I also thought that whatever that I like, the user will like. Whatever that is easy for me is easy to use for everyone. So I made the same mistake too. And some of you who may have a newborn, when you first have your new baby and you probably Google a ton sheet of things, and you want to know what actually is good for babies, how to make them, you know, into a genius kid, prodigy. So you probably have read that very young children, babies, they respond well to shapes and colors. So you bought this thing and then you hang this over their crib, right? So you are the customer, you pay for this product, but the actual user sees this. So they almost see no color, they almost see no shapes. So this is how it is when you ask a stakeholder and the answer is, I want everyone to use the product the same way, because they are actually the one financing the product, not the one using the product. So this is something that if you are going to facilitate a design sprint, you need to make that distinction clear. So what do we really know about the user? It's a difficult question to ask if you don't have a certain structure around the question. So we tend to use this user empathy map by the Nielsen Norman Group. We try to map what the user say, what the user thinks, what they do, what they feel, and the goals that can be relevant to our product. And the result of doing this session is we come up with a persona like this. So Razif here is the millennial spender, don't have much money, but want to settle down and get married, but every month he doesn't know why he has no money left in his account. And we map our assumptions of his expenditures. So these are all assumptions at the moment. We call this proto-persona. So we all know a Razif. We all can kind of like project our understanding of Razif. And then we go a little bit deeper and we try to map what Razif says and does, what he thinks and feel, what he sees his friends' lifestyle posts on Insta stories, so he want to buy whatever that they have. He hears that Asia is having a sale. Clearly this was like, you know, pre-coronavirus period. But we also have, because we have mapped what all his sensories, we kind of can also feel his shoes and map his pain. So we came up with his pain down here. But again, and then we would cross-reference this pain and turn it into a gain over here that we think we can help with our product, right? But again, these are all still assumptions. It's still our assumptions. We have no hard data about this. So what we do next is we actually validate it with the user. So I don't have images of us validating with Razif, but this is another example is we actually validated our assumption with Petronas engineers, and we were very, very wrong. Where we did our assumption of how an engineer thinks, what they what they hear, what they see. We actually never considered the environment they work in. So if you can see my highlight right now, so this guy over here is an engineer. These two are actually Stampede designers. So they were on a shadowing mission for 12 hours. So they were just shadowing this guy for 12 hours, walking around the refinery plant, realizing that it is hot. They are in coveralls. They're not in an air-conditioned room. Malaysia is very hot, by the way. And they have to climb a 7-story refinery tank twice in that 12-hour shift. They have to wear heavy boots. But the most interesting thing they discovered was, if we were going to build a mobile app for these engineers, they couldn't use it because they have to leave their phone at the door before they enter the refinery plant, because those phones are not explosion proof. So then they have to use this smaller phone, like a brick, that looks like a brick. Like that is just like the screen size is just this big. Okay, yeah, just this big. So whatever fancy animation that you do, whatever nice skeuomorphism that you try to impress them with, it wouldn't have worked because they wouldn't have cared about that. They didn't even have the screen real estate to view all that. So that was when we discovered, holy shit, we were so wrong about all our assumptions. But we were very happy that we get to know that we're wrong before we built the product. It would have been a massive backfire if we have not done this. So that's why it's always very important to validate. And I'm not saying, like, a lot of people, if you talk to business owners, you talk to product owners, everybody is scared with the word research. I know that some of you here are researchers. You probably have, you're scared to say the R word just because people think that research is often lengthy, confusing, doesn't yield actionable results. But this is research. What you see right now, validation this way, is just enough research for you to get to a design sprint. So we have found that actually businesses, this kind of actionable research, they are more than happy to give buy-in. They're more than happy to participate. Okay, so now that you've done the research, you need to select the right people for your sprint team. And so we usually we get asked this question, who should join? And a lot of designers would answer this, there's no need. Every single designer say this, they feel like design sprint is for designers. That's not true. So developer is sad. And then we go and ask developers, hey dev, do you want to join our design sprint? No. Every single developer said no when we first asked them to join. I can testify to this because I'm married to a developer. So they're not really, when they hear the word like design sprint, like, why do you need me to be in the design sprint? I have a development sprint. But it's a totally different thing. Even getting buy-in on who to join sometimes take time. But a good composition of a design sprint team is typically consists of the CEO himself or somebody high enough to be the decider, somebody who runs operations, the designer himself, the development lead, head of product, but somebody who is very important and very critical to a design sprint but often excluded is actually the customer support guy. This guy would know all the pains of your customers, of the users, and therefore he is a very important person to have in your design sprint. I have also experienced that many people feel like, committing their time to a 5-day top-down is a bit hard to swallow. So you gotta sell it like as if it's an adventure. It is like we're on an adventure to actually figure out whether this thing actually work or not before we build it. So if you're a sprint facilitator, if you want to run the next design sprint in your company, you need to have to sell it. And I have always defaulted to choosing people who is very growth-minded, who believe that it is better to learn something new than to be right. Even though that person may not be somebody very senior, if that person is willing to be part of a team to figure things out, then I would always choose that person to join the design team. Right. So now that you have all these ingredients, so you have your research, you know your user, you know your team members, you have invited them, you have sent the welcome note. Monday starts, the first day of your design sprint starts. So this is where you do your map. So in the morning, typically we would engage the experts. We will ask them to come and join us for a few hour session. Usually what we have found is they are very reluctant if we say we need them for the entire day. But if we promise them that it will be, you know, like just for 2 hours, and there will be food, there will be snack, and it's not gonna be at the office, it's gonna be in a separate location, they're actually pretty happy to come. And once they're there, because we have done our research earlier, so we would validate our research with them, and we'll try to ask for the questions that we need before we let them go. But if you have done good enough research, you actually don't need to bring the experts on your first day. We find that when we have the expert, or sometimes we even bring the user with us, we get all these nuances that is typically not available in a user interview formal setting. So the user themselves feel like they are very invested in the product. And in the morning, we set long-term goal. After that, we define the sprint question. And in the afternoon, we would map the problem. We will translate pain points that users are feeling into opportunities, and then we're gonna target specific problem. Now, you always have to remember that in a 5-day design sprint, it sounds like 5 days is a lot, but actually it's not. You will have so many red herring problems that would occupy your attention, that will look probably very sexy, and this is where you actually need somebody who knows design, business, and tech for them to be able to triangulate and choose the right problem to solve. And the step, so when you do a journey map, typically you will start with the user's first step into your product. Then you would add more steps until the user's goal has been reached. We find that it's very helpful if you only dedicate one design sprint for one persona. So in the past, we have tried to cover 2 different personas in one design sprint. We managed to do it, but we felt like we didn't go deep enough for one user because there was no time. So if you really want to get to the right depth, one persona is just right for one design sprint. So a map looks like this. It's quite simple. So you start from the left and you move to the right where you have your end goal. And as the user tries to reach the end goal, they will make a series of steps. Sometimes another actor or another user would be introduced, but our attention is usually on this primary user. Right? So these are the steps that they do. Now, it can be, in my experience, it can be really easy for you to really get carried away with it, and you can come up with like 100 steps to get something. If that happens, just take a step back and look again and see if you are now going too granular and not giving you enough, not giving your user experience some flexibility. Usually for a design sprint, 15 steps is the maximum. Right. Another tips that I would share with you is on the first day, even though it's called the problem definition day, it is really, really tempting for you to start going into solution already, because you see a problem and you immediately go into solution mode. So when you hear somebody saying, this is easy, we just need to, as a facilitator, as somebody who runs design sprint, you need to stop them and say, not yet, that's for tomorrow, because today we are all about the problem, right? So don't go solutioning yet. And now the next step that you're going to do is you're going to look for opportunities. So there are many product opportunities coming from one problem. Every step on the journey actually has their own pain point, and every pain is actually an opportunity. However, if you ask somebody, if you ask your sprint team, okay, let's come up with opportunities for this product, it's quite hard for them to imagine what those are. It is always easier for you to ask them, what are your challenges? What are your pain points in using this product? It is so much easier to complain than to come up with a solution, right? So make use of that, use that to your advantage, use that human behavior to your advantage, get people to start complaining. Misery deserves company. So what you can also do is you can cluster related steps and assign them to groups. So you can, if you have like a 7-person team, sprint team, you can break them into pairs, and then you can assign them to each pair to a cluster. So that will be, so they can check, they will be checking and balancing between the two of them. And it's always better for this to be a group activity. Right. So now that you have come with a pain point of a specific task, you can always you need to then translate it to a how might we statement. And I'm sure many of you here have done design thinking in the past. So if the pain here is the trial search result is not relevant, the opportunity on the flip side of the coin is how might we improve the relevance of search result. So the moment we show this to sprint participants, they get it. So they understand that actually from my complaints, I can make something useful out of it. So once they have done this, then you can paste. So they would do this on a sticky note, and then you will paste it on the journey map like this. So that will now be changed to opportunities. Now, so we have quite a number of opportunities. So sometimes if your journey map has 15 steps, you may have like 50, 60 opportunities. It's quite a lot. So what you do next is prioritizing. Which one do we actually focus on? So as a sprint facilitator, you would give everyone an equal number of dot stickers, and then you will get them to vote on opportunities that are good for the product. It sounds easy, and the moment they start doing it, you would be noticing patterns. Some opportunities will have a lot of dot stickers. Some opportunities have none, even though it's actually good, but maybe people don't really understand it. So by itself, voting is very hard because if you don't set a criteria. So what we usually do is we ask user to triangulate to make decision on which opportunity to vote based on business value, user value, and business urgency. So this, if you notice this is actually very, very sexy to any business owner out there, because when you're making product decision, it is actually with two things in mind. One is the business, the value that you're bringing to the business, and second is the value you're bringing to the user. So if you are a UX practitioner, you have taken care of the user, but you have also taken care of the business. Right. So after the voting has happened, this is how it's gonna look like, and then come in the hippo. The hippo, we like to call, even though this person doesn't need to be the highest paid person, but we call him hippo anyways. So he is actually our decider. He typically represents either the product or the business, and he would have very deep understanding of all three, of the business, the design, and also the technical limitations. So he would come and he would throw his weight around, and then he would start choosing the opportunity that actually is relevant to the business and the product's long-term plan. So many times we actually see very interesting votes from the decider. He does not have to vote based on the popular votes done by the sprint team. So it is totally it's a democracy, plus it's also a dictatorship. A practical tip here that we do, and this is not covered in the sprint book, usually we would ask the decider to justify or rationalize why this is the best opportunity for him. So the team gets to debate and gets to ask questions, but ultimately they would also understand why this decision was made. So it helps everybody be on the same page for the next step. Right, so you're done with Monday. Lots of things on Monday. Monday is usually the most tiring day of the design sprint. On Tuesday, you get to sketch. This is a fun day. In the morning, you do lightning demo, and in the afternoon, you're gonna do sketching. So lightning demo is just, so this is okay, if you see any beautiful UI design out there, trust me, they're not done in isolation. They probably is a remix of something somebody else has done before. So lightning demo is just like that. So Asha over here is our data scientist, and she actually was inspired by this particular interface because it shows a certain progress of a user visually. So Mujib here, our designer, was actually immediately capturing that inspiration into an inspiration wall. So this happened very rapidly. One person has around 3 minutes to share their inspiration while somebody will capture. So the wall then looks like this. In a good session, you will have around 50, 60 ideas. And these ideas are very, very relevant to the problem you're about to solve. So imagine if you have like a wall of inspiration of 50 different variations of ideas that you can use already for your product. We have clients actually asking us to preserve this wall. A year after that design sprint, I went back to the same meeting room and this wall was not erased. They kept it. Simply because they feel like, oh, you know what, in the future, if we want to make another version of the product or we want to introduce a new feature, we actually want to use one of these inspirations. Yeah, lots of people actually take Insta story in front of this wall. Okay, so once you have the wall, in the sprint book, actually, the author recommended that you need to start with doing Crazy 8. So Crazy 8 is just like you using a piece of A4 paper and you fold it until there are 8 sections, and then you start sketching 8 solutions in 8 minutes. So 1 minute per solution. We have done this, but strangely, actually, the reason why you do this is because you want people to warm up. You want people to not be scared sketching. The Sprint Book said that they have seen many people feeling very anxious about sketching an interface. In our history of running design sprint, nobody bothered about the Crazy 8. Everybody is just so excited to start sketching. So I don't know if that is because it's Southeast Asia, we're all very repressed in terms of arts when we were kids. But yeah, so that's what I've seen so far. And we give them around 90 minutes to start sketching solutions. So everybody would be working individually for this. This example is one of the engineer themselves was actually drawing a sketch of data he needs to know about a refinery equipment and how can he monitor this refinery equipment, making sure it's always safe. Right, so once you have that sketches, on Wednesday, you would put them in an art museum formation like this. So all the sketches would be hang on the wall around the room. Actually, if you can see the sprint table here is not that messy. I wouldn't call this a messy table, but the messier it gets, the better the sprint. So everybody would then be given dot sticker to go around and for them to start voting the solutions that they want to bring into the prototype. So the voting will look like this. When you give lots of dot stickers to people and they start voting the solution that they like, you're gonna start seeing heat map. It's almost like you're watching, if you have used Hotjar, it's almost like you start to seeing hot areas, hot solutions. In this example, the blues are the votes that the team casted, whereas the pinks are the one that the decider chose. And in this example, actually, the decider went with the popular vote. Yes. Right. So now that the decider has decided and you already have a good solution to bring into your prototype, The next thing that you would do is create a storyboard. We actually, initially we thought that we love doing storyboard, like you immediately start drawing wireframes in Sketch or inside Figma, but actually then we realized it's just a designer's wishful thinking. It's always good to start storyboard with the information architecture, and this is what we did. So typically a storyboard represents the entire progression of the prototype, and sometimes the prototype can be so big, there will be 70 screens. You're not gonna hear this in the Spring Book. In the Spring Book, actually they say just around 15 screens, but sometimes products can be very complicated. So we would list all the screens that user will see plus the information that they expect to see on that screen first. We don't even worry about the interface yet. What matters is actually the progressive disclosure of information from one screen to the next. So once we're done with this, then we go with the complicated version. But in my experience, it is much easier for when you get here if you have done the information architecture. So this part actually, even though it looks complicated, it would be so much faster because the bulk of the thinking was actually in the previous process. So this is our final storyboard before we come out with the prototype. On Thursday, we will do prototype. You can either use very rudimentary tool for prototype, like you can use PowerPoint or Keynote. If you have overachiever designers in your team, they would probably want to go with Sketch, InVision, or Figma. Or sometimes you can even get away with doing a paper prototype, but it doesn't feel that real. A prototype needs to feel like as if it's a real thing, but you totally know it's fake. So this is an example of our designer actually keying in real data, because the user who would be testing this prototype are real engineers. So they need to believe the data. So all of those lines in the graph was actually hand designed, but they represent actual data that the engineers totally will believe. So it takes a dedicated team. It takes a very collaborative environment for this to happen. Right. So once you have all the screens, you then need to organize and stitch your prototype into one coherent flow, because later you're gonna do test script for this. In an overachieving team like mine, the wiring looks like this. So we recently moved to Figma. Very happy with Figma, and this is how we do our stitching for a prototype. I think these are around 45 screens. It took us 2.5 days with 4 designers to do this. Right. So now that you have your prototype, Friday is my favorite day. As a designer, and because I'm married to a developer, I kind of get that shipping shitty things really kills your soul. No makers ever want to ship shitty things. Like, can you imagine you're working hard until late night, building a product that you know will fail? Nobody in their sane mind would actually want that. So in order for us to not ship shitty things, there are 3 simple rules for you to run usability testing. So rule number 1 is your user's job is to identify both the good and the bad experiences. Your job as the maker is to watch and listen. And if enough users say something is shit, don't ship it. So these are very common sense rules, but not many people actually take the time to run usability testing. I personally have found it very magical and infectious. Any team we introduce usability testing to immediately want to do it again, and it is so ridiculously cheap. In more than 5 users, you're just gonna see the same pattern over and over again. But you do need to have a solid test script. So when you write your test script for your usability testing, these are the rules. You need to know the guiding questions. You yourself need to test the prototype so that you're familiar with the flow. When you interview the user, ask for consent. Begin by getting to know the user, put them at ease, reassure that they're not being judged, encourage them to speak out loud. These are all very research-centric rules, right? But it is again, it's just you trying to get as much as possible out of the user. And this is a typical test script structure that we use. We have icebreaker questions, then we introduce our goals to the user. We have some context setting questions, then we introduce the prototype. We typically run 2 types of testing in 1 hour. The first test is unmoderated, so we let the user try. We let the user loose in the prototype, and to continue completing a task until they feel like they can no longer proceed. And then we ask for their impression. Once that is done, then we go to moderated. We give them task by task, and then they would continue. They would do this again, and then we stop them and we ask questions. So the first one is more behavioral. We want to see blind spots. For moderated testing, it's because we want to dig deeper for each screen. At the end, then we thank the user and ask if they're open to come again in the future. Okay, so now that you have the prototype, this is it, guys. You're gonna do usability testing. First, you need to set up the interview in the morning, interview room. There are 2 rooms. One is interview, the second is observation, and you need to have a connection between the 2 rooms. And all day, you're gonna interview 5 users, take notes, take patterns, and then you debrief. Setting up the prototype is easy. Again, you need 2 rooms, but these don't have to be physical rooms. Typically, this is our setup. If we're running a mobile app testing, in our interview room, we have the mobile arm to hold the mobile phone. Hopefully it won't fall, latest iPhone. And it's connected to a laptop that you then use Zoom, similar to what we're using right now, and streaming a live feed to the observation room, where you receive Zoom, you show similar conference, video conference like this on the TV, and you take notes. So this is our setup. On the right here is the setting up the hardware and the video stream. And then this team is actively listening to the interview session happening in the room. Sometimes we use Sarah here to test whether the user whether it's a comfortable position for the user. We nickname our interview webcam as Sauron. Who needs no introduction here. Right, but again, I said, interview room and observation room don't really need to be physical rooms. They can actually be 2 sides of the same highway rest area chair. So this was a testing that we did for Touch and Go. Again, Sauron is here. So this is our user, and this is Zoe, our designer, asking questions, feeding it to this laptop, which then zooming it live here. What you can see under my scarf is actually a headphone listening to whatever this guy was saying. So I was like literally eavesdropping, and we take notes at right away. It was necessary because we were introducing a service that would have been where the registration needed to happen at the public area. So we were trying to mimic the actual environment as close as possible. Yeah, so on the screen, you're gonna see the user's movement, and also you're gonna see his facial expression. One thing that I like to share is our note-taking method. When you have 3 note takers writing down notes on a sticky note, it can get quite confusing. We don't know whose notes is this, and if we want to ask more questions, we don't know who wrote this, we don't know the meaning. So we came up with this system. We label the task number on the top left, and then we also take note of the current screen name, and the user, because remember you have 5 users, so you might want to label your user number. Next, we would write our note taker initial, because later on when we crunch data, if we have question, we can always ask the right person. And then we write down the comments and observation. At the top right is our is indicating whether the feedback is positive, negative, no feeling, or a suggestion from the user. So this is the kind of note-taking format that we use when we run usability testing. Now, why is this important? Because this is just one note, but you may have hundreds or thousands of notes, depending on how happily your user divulge information to you. but it can quickly, very easily, like one user may have 100 to 150 different points. So it can get pretty overwhelming if you don't know, if you don't have these rules. Once you have clustered your findings and you start seeing patterns, you're going to be so amazed. This is what we discovered after we have completed one usability testing. So for example, we thought that this would have been a sure win screen, but there was so many bad feedback about this screen. People were confused that we ended up killing this feature. And if you visit this website and you download this app, DriveMark Safer Driving app, actually this feature survived, and it is still the dashboard of DriveMark because it survived this design sprint. Yeah, so this is how we cluster information, and all of this is actually made available to everybody in the sprint team, the stakeholders. It's all very transparent. Right, so once you have that, now it's over. The design sprint is finally done. You would probably end up with one of these three outcomes. Either you would have an efficient failure where your prototype sucked, but you have learned something and you have saved your team many months of work building the wrong product. You might want to come out with better problem definition. You might have another solution and then you can run a sprint for that. A second outcome is a flawed success. Sure, some ideas are great, met your users' need, but not all of them. You learn something and you can, whatever that work, you can actually send it over to developers while you iterate and test things that don't work. The holy grail of a design sprint is an epic win. Users love your concept. Immediately they ask, when is this going to be launched? So the moment we get that, we know that we had an epic win. So, but regardless of that, what you should still do is you should still measure once you launch. This is an example of us measuring the product performance before design sprint. So if you look at this graph, this was the before graph and this was the after design sprint. So we can clearly see there's improvement in engagement. There were more champions from the user side, and champions are great because they really broadcast what's great about the product, creating more organic reach. But this couldn't have happened if we didn't really run a good design sprint. Right. I have also, now this is, I know that everybody is wondering, like, great, now 5 days, you bring people all into one room, but that's not possible now. How do we do this when everybody's on a lockdown, right? So I had that exact question because during the duration of this lockdown in Malaysia, we are actually closed for 2 weeks. These 2 weeks, we were supposed to run 2 design sprints, so that's not gonna happen. But we were wondering, like, have we been limiting ourselves and can we actually run design sprint remotely? And immediately we start thinking of pain points, right? Because we love to complain. So we start thinking of pain points. Challenges would be communication is going to be harder for sure. It's difficult to argue with somebody when you can't see, or debate with somebody when you are missing the non-verbal cues. Obviously, there will be technology limitations. Zoom won't work. Some people have connection problems. Mic is bad. Or lots of distractions. You're wearing pajamas and you're running design sprint. Yeah, that's not gonna happen. How do you time box design sprint? How do you tell people, okay, you literally have 1 hour, because you can't really control them. They're not in front of you. And we're expecting low engagement because when you're at home, you kind of feel like you're in a safe space, you are relaxed. You're probably not just gonna sit in front of your computer for the entire day. Then, like, maybe your spouse will be cooking and it smells great, and then you went to the kitchen when your sprint team is actually debating about something. So these are the kind of challenges that we expect. Some ideas that we're going to try, because we are actually going to run our very first design sprint from home in 2 weeks time. We are thinking that we probably can break a problem into smaller sprints. So instead of actually going for highly complicated problem that takes 5 days, perhaps we can actually break it into 2 different problems and use 3 days instead of 5. So this is easier to maintain people's attention. Another thing is we probably should also assemble sprint veterans. That means we give priority to people who have joined design sprint before this, because they already know what to expect. They already know that the moment the sprint starts, there's no devices in the room. So sprint veterans are our favorite people for sprint from home. We also need to overboard our sprint team, and overboard means we need to mentally prepare them. We need to give them guidelines on how to protect their space while they're running design sprint, how to reduce distraction, how to probably coach their spouse about this. So there's a lot of preparation that we need to do. We also are planning to move the sprint room online, and it used to be a physical space. Now, how do we make it virtual? Another thing that is important is we must make sure that we use the right tools. Because now we're going to be very reliant on Zoom. Is there if suddenly like Zoom server just crap out because everybody in the world is working from home, what is our option? That kind of thing. We need to stress test our equipment, our videos, our audio, and how then we also manage energy and distraction. So how do we determine it's time for break? How do we keep people focused on a certain discussion without doing something else? Prototyping collaboratively have been something that we're very, very happy to do. We use Figma, and the moment we start prototyping, actually everybody in the sprint team, sometimes people offsite will be given links so that they can see what's going on, they can contribute data. And another thing that we're planning is somebody would be responsible for different parts of the sprint. So for example, after you have done your sketches, somebody would actually collect these sketches and then put it on a Google slide to preserve it. Because we will no longer have the luxury of having an art gallery. So Google slide will be our art gallery. But something very important that I realize is sprint is supposed to be a fast moving session, but it probably would you probably would need to give people a little bit more time to flesh out ideas, simply because people are not used to working from home. We have been doing it for 15 years. We have been working remotely for 15 years, but even sometimes it's difficult for us to properly articulate or properly come up with an idea that we feel is worth exploring. So sometimes it's just a factor of give people more time to do this. Right. So one thing that we were planning to do is, as I was doing my own research on how can I run design sprint remotely, and I found Miro, and I'm pretty sure many of you have seen Miro. Miro actually have its own remote design sprint template. So all of the activities that you do in a design sprint, Miro already have a template for it. So we are very, very excited to give it a try and see how easy it is to use. If you can see at the lower left here, you can see dot stickers. So those are gonna be stickers for you to do voting. So yeah, so they have thought of everything. I'm very excited to give this a try, and I probably will let Kiat know how it goes after. Fingers crossed that we're gonna have a successful remote design sprint. For those of you who are not used to who doesn't know have much background about design sprint, design sprint was done by the Google Ventures guy, and they wrote a book about it. Very, very good book. It has a lot of checklists. It's basically just a recipe. You just need to follow it. Whatever that I have shared with you today is a little bit more flavor that we give based on the experience that we had running design sprint. But seriously, go check the book. And I always like to end my talk by saying that courage is more important than confidence. Debbie Millman is one of my big design heroes. It is really, really important that if you have never run a design sprint before this and you feel like you're not confident doing it, do it anyway. Trust me, when I did it, I sucked. But after I've done it 20 times, I still suck, but at least I suck less. Yeah. Right. Thank you.
Wow, wow, thank you. I mean, it's good that we are in Zoom here because you can't hear how many screenshots they have been taking and all the all the cameras. Oh wow, I learned a great deal. I think I learned a great deal more in a remote meetup like this than in a physical session or when it's like in person. I think you get to focus more, you know, as compared to like when you're organizing a physical one and then you have all the attendees and everything else to deal with. Wow, thanks
Yeah.
very much to that for all your sharing. I think it's very, very useful. Hopefully everyone here has gotten a lot out of this as well. We do have the recording. As you can see, the Zoom is like recording itself there. So yes, we will share the video as soon as it's ready. I'm just gonna stop the screen share and go to our Chrome. Okay. Right. Everyone can see my screen? Okay. If you can see my screen, yes, give thumbs up. Yeah, we're just kind of going through the questions that we have here, and let's see. Top number, the first one. A frustration I have with dog voting is that people tend to vote unknowingly for post-its that already have many votes on it. So it's like bias lah, right? Influence.
I know, right? That happens all the time.
Are there any other decision-making techniques that you have tried or would recommend?
Well, strangely enough, I've read about it, and actually, if you do it remotely, and if you're smart about it, you can get people to vote without seeing what other people vote until you're ready to show them. And you can do it when it's remote. So that is one of the things that we're going to try. So I'm very curious to see the difference in behavior whether people would vote as a herd or would they actually vote because they see some value in it. But what we did was, and you cannot stop people from behaving with a herd mentality. Some people like, this is so hard, there's like 50 different opportunities here, I don't have time for this shit, I'm just gonna vote what everybody else vote. And you would often see these people would leave the room first to have snacks, bathroom break, and then when everybody else have voted, they would come in and they just like follow. But what you can, I guess what you can do is, for those who are very invested in the product's success, give them this triangulation, vote based on the business value, the business urgency, and the user value. So far, when we use this triangulation, we actually see better valued votes. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Next one, usually design sprints are co-located. So yeah, I think we covered that with the sharing earlier on. Maybe the next one, how do you get feedback from customers about implementing UI or features within design sprints? Feedback from customers about implementing. That's through the testing, right? Or any thoughts?
Yes, that's through the testing, correct. So we would, usually we wouldn't ask, during our usability testing, we wouldn't ask the user like, so do you like these features? Many of the researchers here will probably say, leading question. So we don't ask that. We would instead remember we have two sessions. The first is unmoderated, which is like the most honest feedback we can get for the user because it's very, very behavioral. The second part is moderated, where they describe why they behave like that in the first place. So we tend to get more flesh in our usability testing that way. Based on that, then we decide, okay, whether like this UI really sucks, so many negatives, there's only one positive, then we probably would kill that feature.
Right. Okay. Yeah, this is my question actually. How do you charge for design?
Okay. Well, actually, Kiat, this is a favorite question. Like I get asked this a lot. It depends on usually if you ask me about this, I would first ask you another question again, right, researcher? I would ask, actually, tell me about your in-house team. Do you have an in-house team? If you do have an in-house team, that means you don't need me to bring my entire team to run the design sprint for you. You probably just need consultation, or you probably just need facilitation. So the pricing depends on how much effort it is to run a design sprint. A lot of times, sometimes you already have a mature design team. It's just that it's difficult for you to facilitate when you're all in the same organization. Sometimes stakeholders tend to listen more to outsiders. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm happy to be that outsider.
Do you and your team always use the same design sprint format for different projects? Have you ever iterated on design process, or have you found success with the same format? Have you always found success with the same?
So at Stampede, we kind of have a mental batch, how many design sprints you have run. Because I have been the longest, so I have, if I were to get a pin, I would have gotten 20 pins of running design sprint. Most of my team members, 12, 13 pins. But the reason I say this is because when we start with pin number 1, we just follow whatever the Google book said. We just, like my first design sprint, I actually had the book with me, and when I'm not sure how to proceed, I would actually just open that book in front of a client. As a gift, I gifted that book to that client, and then I bought another book for myself. So gifting design sprint book has been my favorite thing. I originally followed the format to the dot, and then I started noticing some things that is not necessary. Depending on the client. If the client is very big organization, enterprise, they probably, like the design sprint book says, you need to maximize, you need to limit your sprint team to only 7 people, right? But when you do it with an enterprise and it's for a product that, like 20 different refinery plants around Malaysia would use, you kind of have 14 stakeholders want to join. So the most that we have run, the biggest design sprint we have run was 22 people. We couldn't fit our sprint room. And the strange thing was, even though after we tell them that, okay, we have finished day 1 and day 2, you don't need to be here for prototyping, they insisted to stay because they got so excited about it. So that is a different format. So when you are dealing with that kind of stakeholder management on top of facilitation, so you kind of need to adapt a little bit. The structure itself still remains the same. You still have 5 days, but what you do and how you do it would likely, very, very likely will change. Another example I can give you was the project was so complicated. So the problem was so complicated, but it's not because of the problem itself, but because it's a product that requires orchestration between 4 different users. And remember I said that 1 user, 1 design sprint? Yeah, we couldn't do that. So we had 4 different users, and we had to make a longer design sprint. So instead of 5 days, we actually did 10 days design sprint.
Wow.
So again, structure is the same. It's just that we increase the number of days for prototyping, we increase the number of days for solutioning, but the structure remains the same.
So it seems like you take that structure, but you kind of just modify it to suit the context.
I sprinkle salts to it. Yeah. So yes, you modify it and you adapt based on the needs. Yeah.
Cannot be too salty. Malaysian food is very
not too salty.
Okay, would you consider doing a design sprint over 5 days with us 1 day? Okay. Would you consider doing a design sprint over 5 days with us? So we get a more hands-on view of it. So it's kind of running a workshop.
Right. You know what's funny? I was looking at the username. The username says COVID. Uh, yeah, I have given workshops before, but I am planning to give another one because I wasn't really happy with the workshop I gave before. It was a half-day workshop, and I feel like I did more of the talking, and people don't have, and I mean, people felt like it was a lot, you know, like we were compressing like 5 days into a half a day kind of workshop. But I really feel like if you want to really get design sprint, you need to do design sprint. So yeah, so we are hoping that one day we can actually like run a big user sprint workshop, design sprint workshop, sorry, with the pre-sprint where you do the user research and then the design sprint itself and then what happens after that. But all solving one big problem, but we all do it together. So you would do effectively 5 days plus. So that's my dream, and I hope that we can do it soon. But you know, COVID.
Cool. Okay, I think last question here. Could you elaborate more about how you run the unmoderated and moderated tests?
So the unmoderated test is basically we so if a product that we're doing have several major tasks that user need to do, we would usually tell them, okay, here is the prototype. First, please sign up. So they would just sign up, and they would try to accomplish that one task on their own while speaking out loud, and we would just watch without nudging, without interrupting. After they feel like they are done, they will tell us, okay, I think I'm done. So then we give them another task and they repeat the same thing. So there's no interruption. There's only we only give them a goal to accomplish. So that's our unmoderated part. During this unmoderated test, we would observe the facial expression. We would observe if they are using a mouse on a web application, we will observe the cursor. You can't see my nails, okay? The cursor, where their cursor is, because typically where your cursor is where you are paying attention. If we're testing a mobile app, we would see where they hover with their finger. They probably will not touch it, but we want to see the hovering of the finger. So it indicates the area of interest. Facial expression, whether they're confused, whether they had an aha moment, whether they feel bored. Actually, what we have never really cracked was we discovered that everybody actually skip onboarding, and they actually didn't even notice that they skip it, because during unmoderated they would just skip. But then when moderated, when we ask, we noticed that you skip onboarding. No, I find it useful. So, but the behavior is like, I don't care about your onboarding, just let me in. So this is why unmoderated is very fun to watch, because sometimes people don't notice that they're giving away these signals. Right. So that's during unmoderated. Then moderated is a bit more simpler. You have a series of test scripts. So after they have done a certain task, then you're gonna ask, what do you understand from what you just did? What do you think about it? So there's a little bit more structured script for moderated.
Right, great. I think there's one question that's kind of came in. That will be probably the last one that we will cover, as is running late. So what would you say is the biggest thing about design sprints that help you, your team, and your stakeholders to achieve success with your products?
Wow, existential question. This is interesting. You know how UX is always about, whenever you talk about UX, you always see this Venn diagram, right? UX, the first few slides of any UX presentation would be a Venn diagram showing business, technology, design, right? Yeah, concentric circles. Design sprint is actually watching this happen. So instead of just just okay, yeah, Venn diagram, 3 Venn diagrams, and then you need to hit the center. But design sprint is actually really seeing UX in action. And if you have a stakeholder who doesn't believe in UX, or if you have a developer who feels like UX is something a designer should do, design sprint will change their mind. That's what I think. We have won so many allies in UX and in design through design sprint. Yeah, so that's my biggest takeaway.
Oh, thank you. So for those who came in anyway, just kind of want to show the results. Let me see. Yeah, so we actually have quite a surprisingly more or quite a good mix of like,
Oh, many researchers.
all the researchers as well. Interesting.
I know, that's so awesome.
Hey Shaza, I actually have a question, if you don't mind taking. You mentioned earlier that you do quite a bit of user research prior to the start of the design sprints. And I suppose the question I have is that for how do you prioritize what personas that you want to bring into
Overnight.
the design sprint?
Overnight parking.
Yeah. Actually, that's a very good question, and I would have answered that if I didn't remove that slide from my presentation today. Okay, have you guys heard about a book called Crossing the Chasm?
Yeah.
Yeah, if
No.
you have heard about it, you know, okay, Google it after this. So it's actually a marketing method of how do you know who to market your product first. But it's beautiful because it's actually it divides your user into segments based on your company's ability to first market to that segment. So if you're a very new company, there you go. Thank you, Kat. Awesome. Oh, okay. That's
Cool.
not so expensive. Book depository is the best. Yeah. So so you know how okay, if you can look for the segments, can you just do me a favor and Google the segment, please? Yeah. Then I can just yep. Perfect. There you go. So this is how any technology is being adopted out there. Any new technology that you introduce, it will follow this curve, right? So if you're a very new company, you wouldn't want to, the reason why you shouldn't target everybody, because look at how many percentage of laggards you might, your marketing might reach. You don't want laggards. Laggards are people who would never use your product anyway. So why do you want to bother market to them? So usually when we interview companies, we would first ask where are you in the chasm? Have you crossed the chasm or haven't you crossed the chasm? And if you're very early, do you know who your innovators are? Innovators are people who would queue outside of the Apple store when the first ever iPhone came out, just because they are so attracted to something novel, something new. So they would be the person who would be most forgiving to your product, even though it's shit. They don't care if it doesn't come with, if it's just bare minimum. They're not looking for Microsoft Office suite. They're just looking for one thing that does one thing well. And you want this kind of innovators because they will make your product, they will become your first beta testers usually. So if that company is at this stage, we will look for users who are innovators. We would try to help them identify that. Now, if after you already have innovators, then you might want to move into the early adopters. Now, early adopters, even though the percentage is 13.5%, they're very, very important because they are the ones who would allow you to leap across that gap over there. So early adopters is already quite sizable. So for you to actually be able to attract early adopters, your product need to have more features. It has to really, really solve several pain points very, very well. So this is how we determine which user to focus at which stage.
Hmm.
Right. Thank you.
Hey, Shaza,
Sorry.
Yes.
yeah, I have a question. Can I ask a question actually?
Actually, I was trying to not. Okay. Because we are running actually overtime, so
Okay, sure, no problem. But I can ask her offline maybe or something.
yeah, I think it's better that any further questions, let's ask it offline. I'm just going to share, give you more followers. If anyone follows that.
Oh God. What was my last Insta story? Sorry. Oh no, no design sprint for sure.
Right, you can get in touch with her. And just before we go, I would actually like to do a group photo. So if anyone would like to turn on their camera, and then I can just do a screenshot for a quick one.
Okay, hang on. I'm gonna change. How do I change to speaker view? There you go.
Oh, wait, how are you taking the photo? How are you taking the photo?
It's just a screenshot. It's just a screenshot.
I see. Okay.
Okay. If the rest is ready, I'll just do a 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay. That's it.
Cool.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for joining us for this very first virtual meetup with XD Singapore, and we hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Thank you, Shaja, for sharing all your wisdom on running design sprints. Once again, the recording will be shared with the group, so stay tuned for that. And we look forward to seeing you next month, and it'll be a virtual one, I believe.
Thanks, Shaza. Thanks, Kiat.
All right. Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Kat. Thanks, Shaza.
Stay safe. Wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
Guys.
Bye.